Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Father Built podcast, where we build up fathers in holiness, healthiness, and happiness. And we aim to give fathers the tools to build their house of legacy. I'm your host, Bobby Peacock. And once again, I have another guest with me today. He is a husband, a father, aka girl dad. He is an entrepreneur, a leadership coaching or accidental entrepreneur. And then he is the outreach and engagement, not specialist, but outreach and engagement person for the SDPB. So that's like a TV show?
TV, radio, we are statewide.
Yes.
We do some cool stuff.
Yep. And then co-business owner with his wife, Haven Arts Collective. And John Setzer called me out for not saying this. He is also a good friend. And so welcome, Nathan Hofer. How are you, man?
Oh, I'm good, Bobby. Thank you for that overly generous intro, I think. Yeah, girl dad, I chuckled because I'm like, I probably had my nails painted so much in my life now that I'm like, oh gosh, just checking to see if it happened.
They were painted
recently.
today?
No, we're good. We're clear today.
We're clear today.
We're clear today.
Yes.
So,
Well,
thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. This is exciting. It's going to be fun to spend some time chatting with you.
Yeah, you're my second guest. I'm still kind of getting used to the whole podcast thing and interviewing people, so we'll see how it goes.
Well,
man.
seeing as how I've been interviewed almost never on a podcast, I think we're going to be figuring it out together.
Yeah. So obviously, I gave you this big, elaborate intro, but like, tell the people who you are, like maybe how you met your wife or fatherhood, whatever.
Oh gosh,
so
that's a story in itself. But
yeah.
just no, like you said, I've gotten to, I'm from South Dakota here. I've gotten to end up in a lot of interesting places. I never thought I'd still be in South Dakota. So I had someone point out to me that working for SDPB, doing like stories around the state of South Dakota was the most South Dakotan thing I could do. And that the fact that I wanted to leave from like when I was 18 was not, the irony was not lost on them. So
yeah,
that's just funny. But I mean, lived here in the Sioux Falls area probably the last, 10, 12 years, something like that. But,
okay, yeah.
I've had a wide range of random experiences in life. I worked in higher ed for a while, then for some nonprofits. And then in that time when I was working in higher ed, I ended up meeting my wife through a mutual friend. Like we just kind of had some crossovers, which is really, it's so funny because, South Dakota, we're separated by like two people.
Yeah.
And we found out like my wife and I probably like passed like ships in the night because she grew up in a small town near where I grew up, and my best friend was from that town, and his younger brother is the same age as my wife, so there's like a couple year gap between myself and her mom and my mom were helping do the graduation party for Sam, and so like they knew each other. So when Dia and I started dating, they're like, oh yeah, I know her mom. I'm like, wow.
Small world.
I know, but
Yeah.
I saw I was working at Dakota Wesleyan University in Mitchell at the time, and we were trying to do a Zumbathon, and we needed some other Zumba instructors. And Dia and I had been friends on Facebook. I don't know if we'd ever really like met face to face before.
Yeah.
Maybe once in passing. And she had posted something about Zumba, and I'm like, sweet. I'm gonna ask her if she has time, because we need another instructor.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, let me look at the schedule. And we just started talking, and I was really enjoying our conversations. And I was like, I think this girl is pretty cute and way out of my league. And but then turns out we couldn't do the Zumbathon. And I just kept talking to her, and from hear her tell, she goes, yeah, he just stopped talking about Zumba. And I was like, he'll get to it eventually. No, Zumbathon was done, and then it wasn't going to happen. We didn't have the space, and we kept talking, and we hung out a few times, and we ended up starting to date. And my favorite story is that my wife will just hate that I'm sharing when I put it out there. Is like the first time I asked her out, she was like, no.
Oh,
because she was
shots fired.
It was good. But we laugh about it because she was like, I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't like like you started hanging out with someone, you're just like, oh, we're dating right away. Like wanted to see if it was serious. So it was all like well-intentioned. And then when I asked her the second time, she said yes. And that was kind of history then for that. But I give her I said, sometimes you got to show persistence. You got to show patience and willingness to rebound from hard things. Cause I was like, wow, that did not go the way I thought. But she's like, let's keep hanging out. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it's not like a no. It was just like a,
not yet.
Not that title, not yet. And I was like, but whew. Yeah. So, but yeah, we've been together since 2013 and no, not 2013, 2011. No, 13. Yeah, 2013. Sorry. Time just flies. Yeah. We've been together since 2013. Yeah, I got to think about it. Been together since 2013. Got married in 2015. Have 2 girls, 7 and 4.
Okay.
That's a roller coaster in and of itself. And my wife's been, you mentioned accidental entrepreneur, like life's funny. I'll just tell you what. But my wife has been a dance instructor for years and years and found out last year that the studio she was at was going to close. And because she'd been teaching there for, I don't remember how many years, but I think we settled on like 16 years she's been teaching, but she doesn't want to, because she started teaching in high school too. So like when she was a senior, so she's been teaching for a long time and she's just very gifted and talented at that. And she found out and she came home and she was like, she was devastated that this place that had been her place was closing. And she goes, I think I'm supposed to do something with it. And my brain was like, no, we don't know how to run a business. We don't have a plan. Like, how are we going to make it work to buy this business? But my heart was just like, this is what, like, we'd been having some weird Jesus moments too of like people saying things over our lives that didn't quite make sense. And she had rediscovered her passion for teaching students dance again and just these things. And all of a sudden we're like, hey, I guess this is what it was about. And so we went through a process from end of January through June last year to purchase the dance studio and create Haven Arts Collective. And so it still does dance primarily, but also, I think it's fitting that the dance studio is in an old church. And so
that's dope.
One of the pillars that my wife wanted to stand on was like, this is a place for ministry and worship. And,
amen.
This is a place where we're gonna her heart is to reclaim the heart of dance with the art of dance. And so
that's good.
So doing all this stuff too, like music and mentorship and worship and arts and dance, and so trying to create a almost like a community space, but the dance studio is the central piece. And it's been fun. It's been a roller coaster. I am like backup maintenance and tech support and random toilet fixer, like those are my titles. I think toilet fixer is up there. So it's been we've learned a lot the hard way. I've only ever worked for nonprofits, so I'm like, what is for profit? I don't. How does one keep a business like that moving? So accidental entrepreneur, 100%. And so it's been a ride, and we're almost a year into it, and like we're still here. We're going to be going into year 2, and hopefully many more after that. But like we made it through year 1. And that's a big deal.
So like, what was it like supporting your wife through this time of like, she had this on her heart, and because like for guys, we mainly can go into the like, I need to fix this kind of thing and like logistics like right off the bat. So like, what was it like supporting your wife on this venture?
Well, my brain went there right away. It was okay, how are we going to make this work financially? Because we're having to buy a building. And then the business comes with that, and it's that's just not cheap endeavor at all. And I was like, I don't know, but we've been, heck, that's how you and I met really, was like, being in a place at a church together where we were able to really like dig into what it was like to listen to the heart of other people and the heart of Jesus through that. And so the fact that I also, I know my wife, which is good, thank goodness.
Amen to that.
Amen to that. But knowing what she said and how, when she says things, what that means, for her to say like, just be devastated, but just I feel like my heart is telling me that this is it, what it's supposed to be. In fact, I was able to still go into like, all right, problem solving mode, or not even problem solving mode. What is that going to be then? Okay,
Yeah.
we were moving forward in faith of like, I told my wife, Dia, I'm going to just say her name instead of my wife. She has a name, Deandra, Dia, D Money. That one isn't going to stick. But I was telling like, I told Dia, I said, this is kind of the coolest thing ever in some ways, because if it works out, it is through none of our own ability or preparation, because just from a financial standpoint, like we weren't set up for that. It wasn't like we'd been planning this for like 5-10 years of like, hey, we're going to take over the studio in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
So we just said like, we're just going to walk forward in faith. And if this is something the Lord really wants us to do, those doors are going to open. And so what we did that night was, like I said, my brain was like, nope. But my heart was attuned to that, because we'd been praying through like, what does it mean to like, what is there's something coming for our family. Like we both felt like the start of 2023, 2022 was just, I mean, frankly, was one of our hardest years of life. And it felt like we were told to like stay put, and like we were just supposed to be still and work towards healing and restoration. And then we both felt like early January, it was like, I said, it's like one of those like push car soap car derby cars, soapbox derby cars, where like they kick out the wood blocks and you just go rolling downhill. We both felt like the blocks got kicked out. I'm like, well, we're moving, but where? And so when that came up, what we did that night was our girls were in bed, and we took their little kid chalkboard and we wiped it off, and we started storyboarding like, what's this place going to be? What's the mission? What do we want it to feel like and look like? And what are we worked on a vision and mission statement on our kids' chalkboard in the kitchen at like 10 p.m.
Wow.
And it was wild. So I was still able to like problem solve and plan and get creative. I mean, I love a good brainstorm. It's very rarely someone says, hey, I want to brainstorm something. I'm like, yes, let me grab some popcorn. Like, I'm in. So it was really good. And a lot of those things, it's kind of crazy to look back on it, because it's been a year and a half now, but to look back at those things that we put out there night one, a lot of those things are still what we want and what we're moving towards. And like those pillars in place, that's all come together, and slowly coming together. It's not an overnight thing. But it started because of night one, and it's wild to think about it. I haven't thought about it for a while. So
no, you
I'm
could,
like,
man.
Look at that.
Thanks,
Jesus. You were in the midst of that right away, because to see that vision when we had not thought about that and talked about that, to give us that insight and clarity, like that is something I'd love to take credit for. But I can't.
It's been all God. And so obviously you guys were been on this business venture, and I mean that probably adds a lot of stress to your life. And so like, obviously this podcast is about fatherhood, and so like how did you manage doing all that, plus your full-time job, plus your leadership coaching, and ministering to your wife, and then also ministering and loving your kids? Like
I mean, I think just to be honest, I think I've got a lot more gray hairs than I did. I think those are coming in nice and thick now. Just put them on display. But also, I mean, I would love to say like, I had everything. It was all perfect balance, and I was just juggling them really easily. But we definitely dropped the ball on some things. We figured out, and we've had to pick things up and run with them. And for me, the leadership coaching I do, it's called Be Planted. So I'll say that. But Be Planted really took a back seat. Like I've done very little with that over the last year, because it just wasn't. It wasn't what needed to have the focus at the time. It's still a passion, and I still envision some things that will come from that. But it wasn't the thing to put the energy into at that point, and so that helped to an extent. But like that thing did not. It exists. It is still around, and I'm still doing some things on the side. But it was not growing. It was not even, I wouldn't even say it stayed the same. It was kind of like, we're going to put it on like
the back burner.
Yeah. It's like, we're putting this thing in idle. It's just it's just going to keep on, it's going to keep running in the background, but it's not a priority.
No, you're good, man.
I didn't want to spill coffee on your floor. That'd be bad news. No, for the coffee and your floor.
Yeah.
But so then we have this interesting balance too of trying to figure it out. One of the cool things we've been able to do, like I said, the interesting balance comes from like my wife. She is really taking the charge on homeschooling our kids.
Yeah.
That's been on her heart from the beginning. And at first I was like, I don't know, but I trust you. And now I've seen how it's working, and it's very beautiful to watch how our kids learn and that unique thing. But that's happening. And then I work from home full time. And so, I mean, I go into the office sometimes, but most of the time, the majority of my time is spent working remotely. We're statewide, so you're kind of like, you're not going to get everyone together in a room anyways most of the time. So it's worked out like that. And then teaching is mostly like an evening endeavor for Dia. And so it's been good because we've also brought our kids alongside in that, and they've gotten to be able to see that and live
from
that
the ground up.
And it's difficult, but we've kind of gotten used to this rhythm over the years because Dia's always taught. But like we have these moments where during the day, most of the time, Dia's with them, and engaged and working with them, and that's been a hard challenge for both of us to an extent. Is like, as she's trying to do the business stuff during the day, and like chunking out time and saying like, hey, this is my work time, and being consistent with that because of the needs of parenthood being on hand. But at the same time, it's been such a blessing to be able to like have our girls, like, they feel like the studio is their second home. Better or worse. Sometimes it's a little like, hey, you don't get that comfortable. There's a bunch of other families here who don't know that that's not how we act. Don't get the pillows out from behind the couch. We're not making a fort today. So that's been really cool, and they get to feel like it's theirs too. And that's been a really interesting experience for me. Because in some ways I experienced that. I grew up on a farm. And so I got to see what that was like. And I got to like live that with my parents. And so that was great. I also learned I wasn't meant to farm in that process. So my patience was not, and focus on the weather was not I don't know how my dad does it. My dad and my mom, they run the show together. I don't know how they do it. It's not my jam. A lot of respect for it, and they're awesome people. But I was like, oh man. But I got to walk alongside it, and our girls get to as well. And they get to have their input on some things. They get to feel like they can own it. They get to feel like they are involved in the process. I mean, we've even asked them like, do you like this color for this room? Like which, because Dia painted repainted one of the studios that was purple, but there was all these different shades, and she let the girls be involved in that process. And so teaching them what it means to be responsible and doing things that are hard, even if we don't want to, is almost easier firsthand of like, because, you know, if I have to go fix some plumbing, or I have to go deal with some electrical, or we have we had some stuff with a parking lot, like I've brought them with me sometimes, or Dia brings them to the studio all the time to be there and see how, you know, things are. And they've discovered like a love for dancing and for, I mean, my oldest, she is even trying to like teach her friends, and we're like, great, you know, and she's right. She's too smart.
And how old are your girls?
Letty is 7 and Gemma is 4. So almost 8 and 5 now. We're getting about 6 months out from that happening, but like we're
so even like from like a base, like you're kind of teaching them about entrepreneurship, and
they are learning at the same pace we are probably. We have had to learn a lot of lessons the hard way, and just things that are you don't know what you don't know. And even if you had asked us, we laugh about this because we heard about this in end of January 23 that the studio was going to close. If you had talked to us early January 20th, like January 2nd, and said like, hey, I think you're going to buy that and we would have laughed at you and said, no,
there's no way.
Ain't no way. You know, like there's no way we're going to do that. And like I said, it's so we're learning. Like, we've never thought we would run a business. We never thought that was part of our lifestyle. We're learning all the ins and outs. We went through a winter with and learned a lot about snow removal, and parking lot management, things that I didn't think I'd have to learn.
Yeah.
We're learning right now how to deal with a tree that has died in a parking lot, and dealing with utilities and things. I've learned how to do some interesting furnace care, repair, and wiring. So things that I never thought I'd learn. But here we are. We're figuring it out, and year 2 will be easier, and there'll be new challenges that come up. But some of the old challenges that we had to learn through it being difficult or done wrong, or those are the ones that are going to stick too. And so I think our girls getting to see that and walk through that, they get to see how, I hope they're seeing how mom and dad are evolving and growing, because we, handling hard situations and new things and just being honest with them too. Like that's been really hard to an extent of like, I want to seem like I'm the dad who's got it all figured out and together, because I want them to like feel that. But also, as I mentioned to you before we start, I want to be real and authentic in all things, and I want to be honest with my kids. And so sometimes they'll be like, hey, ask me about something. I'm like, yeah, that's been really hard. Thanks for noticing. Or we're working on that, and it's taken longer than we thought. I'm sorry. Or do you want to help me with this? And all those things come together. But they get to see how we are handling those situations. And we aren't always handling them the best. But I hope they see as we learn from it and we deal with it, that how we handle it changes, and how we try to bring each other in and support one another and be unified. But also, first and foremost, that we're trying and we struggle sometimes, but we try to make sure that Jesus is at the forefront. And
that's good.
And I mean, I think just a huge difference is even this end of year show that's coming up that the one and only Bobby Peacock is videoing.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. No, thank you. Shirt.
Yes.
But we, she put on the poster, she's like, where people are going to know what this is. There's stuff in there with a Bible verse on the poster that's going out in the community. The show itself, it encompasses the beauty of and passion of my wife's heart for Jesus, and some of the dances that they have planned. I'm just I'm so pumped because I've seen them. I'm like, this is some of my favorite. I've seen a lot of choreography over the years, and there's been some such amazing stuff that other teachers have done and my wife has done, and I've loved it. But there's this one piece that is close to the end of the show. That is just, maybe it's the end of the first act. I don't know. It's a good one. It's a good one, but it's just so beautiful. And and it's so intense and awesome. And I love it. End of the first act, I remember. And so, it's fun to see that people who are coming, they're also going to be seeing a view of Jesus through what she's doing. And so that's been, really awesome, and hopefully our girls are seeing that in us and in the studio and in our hearts and the hearts of the people who are there. But like I said, we're human, and so we don't always do it right.
And I think for me, just to see that you guys are going after this, it's not just you and your wife, it's you, your wife, and your kids are going after this entrepreneurship of a business, and to let your kids in that is really cool. But then also just to be real raw and transparent with your kids, because I think in today's day and age, we want to hide so much from our kids because we think that we are protecting them, instead of hey, we just need to have an honest conversation of hey, dad is just really stressed out right now, he's trying his best. And I think you hit on something else too of I feel as fathers, we're always on this pursuit of perfection. And it's man, how can we take a step back and acknowledge, drop our pride and acknowledge that we don't have to be perfect, that there are real raw moments where we're not perfect, where we have dropped the ball, but we have to take ownership of that. And so,
one of the hardest things I've had to do, and I do it probably too much, is say sorry to my kids too, because part of it's just humbling for me, because I'm feeling I should have it together, like
Yeah.
I'm their dad. I'm the one who's supposed to be guiding and protecting and safeguarding my family and my kids. And so when I mess up, I'm really hard on myself.
Yeah.
And having to go back, and instead of doubling down on why I was right about something,
Yeah.
going back to my kids and saying, sorry, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
You didn't like, that was not the right way for me to handle this, or like, you were right about that thing. Because I just think back too, and I don't want to put anything on my parents by any means, but I always thought that my dad could take care of anything. And my mom, like if I asked them to do something, like I'm like, I have something, somehow they always found a way to make it work.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how they did that, and made me think that they had it all figured out as parents. I think I was talking to someone the other day, someone else who's a parent in my life. We were just talking. I said, isn't it odd that you thought your parents had it all figured out?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here now, I'm like, I'm sure they didn't have anything figured out, because it is I say this probably too much, but I just like being a dad is awesome. And it's so hard too, because you want such good things for your children.
Yep.
And I don't want to get too like dour here, but like I mean, I know you walked with us through it when we lost a baby in 21 at the end of the year, and like that was part of that year-long recovery we needed, because it was, you don't realize the hopes and dreams you have for someone. Like I didn't realize that I had hopes and dreams for this baby, for Noelle, that were never going to be realized. And and so I saw that, and when that happened, like it hurt, and there was pain, and there was loss. But then as I looked at my other two daughters, and I said, well, no wonder some of these things are hard, because I have unspoken dreams and visions and goals for them, and I haven't even put them into words.
Yeah.
And no wonder it's hard, because I just want that for them. I want them to be, because I just see so much of the good they bring in the world. And I'm just like, I want them to be, I don't even want them to be like me. I want them to be better than me.
Yeah.
Because I know me, and I know where I am, I fail, and where I struggle, and I don't want that for them. And so that was one of those things that was just a really hard situation.
Yeah.
But it really showed me just like the power of kids, the power of your children, because they change you without even knowing it. Because like I didn't know deep down that I had these hopes and dreams and desires for what I want for my kids in the world. I want them to be loved and safe and passionate, and all these different things. And you just like to see that, to have all that potential hidden somewhere, and then to have it get taken away was such an eye-opening experience for so many reasons. Because we don't have to dig into that, but grief is hard. Grief is hard. And how we grieve is hard. But that was one thing that stuck out to me so heavily, was that I didn't know the hopes and dreams I have built up for my children.
Well, if it's okay with you, because we didn't talk about this beforehand. But
I brought it up. Whatever it is, fair game. I open the doors. You walk her through them.
It's like women, like when it comes to, like for example, when I was married, before I was married, I found out that my girlfriend at the time was pregnant, and so and then we lost a child. And I feel like women do a really good job of like the grieving process and walking through the grieving process and acknowledging the feelings and the emotions. But I feel men, like that I know, they don't really talk about it. They don't really, it's like kind of like one of those things of like, it happened, let's move forward. And so like for you, what was that grieving process like?
Well, I was going to say, I think just to like rewind it a little farther than that even,
absolutely.
I went through some other grief when I was just out of like grad school and stuff. I lost my youngest brother
Okay.
in a random, just a strange happenstance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that really had an effect on me. I mean, I didn't realize how much it had messed me up.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to work through that. But
Yep.
I did that. I tried to bury it. And
Yeah.
I literally was having, I didn't realize it at the time, but they were like panic attacks on occasion. Like I literally called, I was working at Dakota Wesleyan at the time, and I literally called the the ambulance. I
Yeah.
called because I thought I was having a heart attack. And I was not. I was not.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to be alone.
Yeah.
And I was, and I didn't want, and the quiet times of the night was like, and going to sleep was hard.
Yeah.
And so I just like, I would stay up far too late,
Yeah.
stay up until I couldn't stay awake. And then
Yeah.
I would go to sleep,
Yep.
wake up, start my day, do whatever, stay really busy. I mean, we
Yeah.
had probably 130, 150 events that I was in charge of that year.
Yeah.
And I was at most of them because it kept me from thinking.
Yeah.
And that carried over, and like it was I mean, it was a problem how I was dealing with it. And I made some other decisions that were just like, you know, nothing like end of the world by any means, but like I chose to engage in like how I was interacting with people in a different way. I pushed people away, and I chose unhealthy relationships, and because I just was like, I didn't want to cope. And I think I was just like, I don't know, afraid, angry a little bit.
Yeah.
Because my brother is 15. He had Downs, just the nicest kid. Like I have so many funny stories.
Yeah.
Like just that year, like he passed away in January, and December, we all happened to be out in the Black Hills at Terry Peak, and he was there with his family. I'm adopted, so it's my birth dad's side, so he's my half brother. But I had no siblings growing up, so all of a sudden I was 18, and it's a whole other story for another day, but I had 5 younger siblings overnight.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. But Dakota was his name, and Dakota, we're like, I know they're staying at one of these cabins. I wonder where he is. And I'm going up the lift, and I hear this sound, and I look down, and there's my brother on the deck of one of those cabins right along the lift with a giant fart machine, just playing that as people went by and just going, excuse me, sorry. And I was like, I mean, that was just, he was just a fun kid. And I think that just hurt inside, and I didn't deal with it. And it affected so many things. And it really affected, I mean, my relationship with my wife when we first were dating and got engaged. Like we had, like, there was stuff from how I dealt with that we had to deal with it almost, frankly, in some ways, almost cost us our relationship.
Yep.
And so I learned through some of that. So I tried to grieve better.
Yeah.
But we were in also like a state of suspended grief because this was November. We found out my sister-in-law was sick.
That's
With pancreatic cancer. And she was a marathon runner, healthy, a nurse. She had just had a baby at the end of August.
Yep.
And so we're like dealing with that. And then in that phase, we lost Noelle, and we tried to move through it quick so we could be there to take care of their kids, or help out where it's needed, because we wanted to make sure that they had time with their mom, and we weren't doing all of it. I'm not saying like we were doing all this, but we wanted to be available. We wanted to be available because we were like, if help is needed, we want to be able to drop everything and be there.
Yeah.
And then we went through some transition in January with our some friends and the church we were at, and that was really hard. And then we lost Rachel in February, and so we were like, we had to like backdate through grief. Like it was like we got through a point to where we were like, we're good enough to handle the next thing. And then the next thing happened, and then the next thing happened. And so like I think we grieved Noelle almost last in the process. Because we dealt with what was the most recent. But it was like, being real is part of it. I mean, you have to be able to open yourself up and say, like, I don't think I have it right. I don't think I'm still, like, I don't even think I know I'm still working through some of that grief. I see it when I see kids that would be the same age as Noelle. And our neighbors have this sweet little girl who I see, and she would be right around the same age, roughly. And I'm just like, she melts my heart because I see what could have been, potential. But I know that like having to address it, finding a way to deal with it, and just like acknowledge it.
Yeah.
I don't like hard feelings.
Okay.
I don't like being sad. I don't
Yeah.
like grieving. It's
Yeah.
not something like I enjoy, you know.
Yeah.
And other people, I know there's other people who do know how to grieve well, and
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm one of them.
Yeah.
But I knew I had to experience it. I had to allow myself to cry and to feel the pain and not push it down.
Yep.
And so, like I said, still working through some of that.
Yeah.
But I hope too that we got to teach our girls that it's okay. And
Yep.
now too, like we talk about Noelle, we bring
Yeah.
her up, like we don't just say like ignore, like we don't ignore that it happened.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Even at Christmas time, we have the girls picked out a little stocking
Yeah.
for her,
Mhm.
and so we remember her, we talk
Yeah.
about her. I mean, we never got to meet her,
Yeah.
but we don't let that be part of our story that is not told.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I know some of my cousins, they they had some older twin siblings that passed away that I didn't know about till someone happened to mention it when I was like a teenager. I was like, wait, they did what?
Yeah.
I had no clue. And so we don't do that with our kids, and we don't do that with other people, and it's hard to like just bring it up. I don't ever want it to feel flippant, but we also are doing it because we don't want people to be, like we said, want to be authentic, but we don't want people to
Yeah.
feel like if they're dealing with something that we aren't a place that you can go to because we're not dealing with anything.
Yeah.
We're going to be open about like, we have 2 kids, but we have a third that isn't with us. And
Yeah.
Gemma, she says she's a big sister, even though she's never known Noelle.
Yeah.
And we haven't really either, you know, just,
Yep.
and she thinks of herself as a big sister to Noelle, even though Noelle isn't here. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just like, I think the only thing I can say is like, you just have to go through it and
Yeah.
not avoid it and push it down. Like I mean, for me, I think it sucks to feel
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
But you have to go through it. Otherwise it doesn't go away.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's an analogy that a pastor friend of mine he uses is like it's the cow versus the bull analogy, where it's like a lot of men, like we want to be known as like strong, and we want to be known as like, you know, like sometimes even like emotionless, and like we'll deal with things in our way, but like when storms come, or like grief storms or whatever may come, like the cows, they see the storm and then they run away from it. And so there's a lot of men out there, and I'm just going to call it out. There's a lot of men out there that are a whole bunch of cows, where a bull will see the storm and they'll know, okay, which direction is the storm going? Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk against the storm, so that the storm is coming, like let's say the storm is going north, well I'm going to go south, and I'm going to deal with all the rain or hail or maybe even a tornado now, so that I can deal with it all now and then be free and deal with all the pain. And the cow, what ends up happening is the storm catches up with the cow.
Yeah.
And so now the cow is running with the storm.
You're in it longer. You're in it longer when
Yeah.
when you face it head on. You know, it's tough and it's hard, and it might be more severe in some ways right off the bat. Like you
Yeah.
might hit the eye of it real hard, like you
Yeah.
said. But going with it, you're just keeping yourself in it longer, and
Yeah.
it inevitably it's gonna overtake you. So
Yeah.
I love that analogy too. I actually just saw someone post that again the other day, and I was like, I forgot about that, and then you
Yeah.
brought it up. So I think that's something that I probably need to apply to other things in my life if it's come up twice in the last like 4 days.
For sure. Yeah. And so like went through the grieving process. I mean, and like even like here's a question for you. Like, did you like cry in front of your kids? Like,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I cried very much in life
Yeah.
until I had kids, and then I cry at a lot of things.
Yeah.
I'm like watching like The Lion
Movies.
King. I'm like,
Oh.
move. And then my girl's like, "Why are you crying?" I'm just like, "It's so sad. He's not with. They don't get to see their dad."
Listen. I was watching a movie the other day, and I think this is real. Like, like once you enter into fatherhood, you become more sensitive, even
Yeah.
though we don't want to admit it. But I was watching like a Disney movie or something like that, and I was just sitting on the couch, and I was just like, man, this is supposed to be like just a heartfelt movie or like a fun movie, and I'm just sitting there and just trying not to tear up. I'm like, where's this coming from?
No, that, I mean, it happens to me all the time. But yes, in that grieving process,
Yeah.
both Dia and I, we were crying and we were sad. And
Yeah.
the girl was like, "Are you guys okay?" And I said, "No, we're
Yeah.
not, you know,
Yeah.
and, but we're going to be. But right now we're sad.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be sad.
Yeah.
And like we can do it. And I think I didn't want to stick in the grief too long.
Yep.
And maybe I should have stuck in there longer.
Yeah.
But there, like, I know for that first day, I messaged people at work. I'm like, I'm out today.
Yeah.
I might be out all week. Like, it's just
Yeah.
like, I can't.
Yep.
And I just, I mean, I think probably for sure the first day and definitely the second day, like, just would cry a good chunk of the day.
Yep.
Or just be like, just be grieving or just like sitting in silence, which,
Yep.
you know me, I don't do silent very well.
Yeah.
It's not my jam.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And
For
so,
sure. Yeah.
Just trying to deal with it,
Yeah.
and not ignore it and push it down and just try to push through and just sitting, even if it was just for a day or two.
Yep.
It was so different from what I did when Dakota passed. What I did with Dakota passed, like, I was down there at the Children's Hospital in Omaha.
Yep.
They declared him. I came back that day. I went to work that night for an event.
Yeah.
I worked all day the next day and the next day, then went down for the wake and stuff. And then
Yeah.
I came back. Like, I made it like people would have just thought I was sick for a day because
Yeah.
I didn't tell anyone. And I just
Yeah.
like buckled down on work, and I put all of myself into doing something.
Yeah.
So I had to feel nothing.
Yep.
Instead, this time I tried to do nothing so I could feel
everything.
everything.
Yeah.
Even if it was for a day or two.
That's a word right there of like doing nothing so that you can feel everything.
And I did not like it.
No, and I don't think
I don't think you're supposed to either. Like,
no, but it's part of the process. I mean, it's just like I tell people there's a difference between being lonely and being alone.
Yeah.
Like lonely is like can be like unhealthy, but being alone can be healthy.
Yeah.
And so it's the same with our feelings of being alone in silence and working through our emotions and feelings is a lot healthier than just like everything's normal, everything's status quo, I'm good, and pushing it off. It just goes back to the cow versus the bull. So
I like that too. That alone versus lonely. I'm gonna borrow that.
You better
and,
quote me. You better quote me on that.
I'll TM trademark Bobby Peacock. I put that TM by that name. But,
Yeah,
but I mean
yeah.
that's true though, because you can be with a group of people and be lonely.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And be alone and be completely content.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, it's a thing though. You've got to figure out how to deal with the hard stuff, because the
Yeah.
hard stuff doesn't go away. It doesn't happen once and just disappear.
Yep.
There are hard things every day, variations of hard.
Yeah.
Some things are like this hard, but
Yeah.
if you're not in a good place, those things that are this hard are all of a sudden this hard.
Yeah.
And it's I guess if you're on a podcast, you can't tell. Tiny little fingers, big arms.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. What were like maybe like 2 or 3 things that helped you in the grieving process that could help other men?
I think for me, honestly, I think it might just be really one thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, maybe that's one thing that's multiple things. So
Yeah, for sure.
That's probably 2 or 3 then.
Yeah.
But it was stopping
Yep.
and letting it be okay to feel.
Yep.
And trying to let that just come out.
Yeah.
And we did. I mean, I remember now. I kind of forgot, but we ended up having the girls go to meet me on Papa's for part of the day that first day.
Yep.
Because it was just so heavy, and it would have been really easy. It would have been really easy for me. I don't know for Dia, but I can speak for myself. It would have been easy for me to just do a bunch of stuff or like take the girls to go do something to keep us from thinking about it.
Yep.
But I knew because of how I had handled things so poorly before
Yeah.
that I needed to sit in it.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was that permission I gave myself that it was okay to feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I needed that reminder too, self-reminder, whether if I don't even know if I don't think Dia ever said anything, but I think it was just something that I felt secure in our relationship.
Yeah.
So I knew that she wouldn't think, I don't think she would think less of me regardless, but that's just not who she is. But I had to feel like that sense of masculinity, that I wasn't less because I was feeling feelings that were hard,
Oh,
that
that's a word.
that I was able to grieve, and it was safe. And I was like, those things, like giving myself permission to sit and
Yep.
feel
Yep.
and know that I'm safe, and that, in fact, I would argue that I felt more like a father in that moment
Mm-hmm.
than I probably felt as a brother when I lost my brother, because I didn't want to feel the hard. I didn't want to acknowledge his loss.
Yeah.
Because I loved him so much.
Yeah.
But because that, I didn't honor his legacy and really live into his memory and feel the joy that comes with that pain.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't get to know Noel, but I had all these, like I said, I had all these dreams I
Yeah,
didn't know I had.
yeah, yeah.
And I had to sit in that grief and know that they weren't going to happen, but also be so overjoyed that I had those dreams that God had given me for this child, and that
Come on.
there's going to be that space for reunification on the other side of this. And so, yeah, I mean, like that'd be for me, that's what I needed, was
Yeah.
space, safety, and just like self-permission to just let it go.
Yeah.
And I would say it wasn't a replacement. It wasn't like I replaced my grief with joy.
Yeah.
But but by letting that grief out, it wasn't mine anymore.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's still my grief, but I gave it out there. I put it out there, and that part of that grief is still there, but the power of it was gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said something that's like is so key, is that like you had to focus on your grieving in a safe place, but then also, help your wife as well as, her husband, and even like, when you told your kids, but like you were like, I can still be masculine and still grieve and still work through my emotions, because my wife is not going to think less of me if she sees me crying or if she sees me going through my emotions. Because I feel there's so many men out there that are like, all right, I need to take care of my emotions in private because I don't have a safe place to experience my emotions. And I can't let my wife see this. I can't let my kids see this. So I need to experience this in private. They need to know everything's okay so that I can tackle everything they have. Where you were like, all right, I'm going to allow my wife, I'm going to allow my kids to see all these emotions, because I'm a man's man, but even men cry too.
And I was going to say, as you were saying it, I was like, it just hit me. And that's, I was like, oh. But I think if I hadn't done that, it might have put more of a distance between Dia and I, because it would have been showing that I didn't love her.
Yeah.
Because she had to go through so much more than I did.
Yep.
Because like that's a whole experience that I'll never understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she had to go through so much more than I did, and that pain, like for me not to feel any of that grief or share that with her,
yeah,
I think would have made a separation for us, in the sense of like, she can grieve. But she doesn't feel like she can grieve together. Like that loss was just hers.
Yeah.
And it wasn't mine. But it wasn't just hers. It was ours.
Yep.
And it's just, the loss is different, but it's shared. And so I think if I had not grieved with her, or had my kids see me grieve, I think it would have put more distance in our relationship. But I also know that I think maybe the next generation of fathers will do it even better than our generation right now, our chunk of the whatever generation we are. I don't know. millennial.
Yeah,
I
we're
think that's
both
right. I think it's where I land.
I'm a millennial too, so
I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah.
Whatever.
How old are you?
Old enough.
Okay, you're
37.
37. Yeah, yeah, you're probably on the higher end of millennials. So.
Yeah, I'm an elder.
Yeah.
I remember the sound of dial up.
Yeah,
The
so
nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that feeling your feelings has been, I think, when you look at like what it was portrayed in movies,
Yeah.
and what was portrayed as masculinity was like you're tough and you're strong and you can be those things.
Yep.
But toughness doesn't have to look like, man, I'm gonna punch you. You know,
Yeah.
like it can look like, hey, I didn't like that. I want to work through this and let's talk through something.
Yeah.
And physicality and toughness are not the same thing.
Yes. Yeah.
I know people who are very tough and very physical.
Yep.
And I know people who are very physical and very weak
Yeah.
in how they handle things. And I
Yep.
know people who are weak and not physical. You know, it's like
Yeah.
toughness and physicality don't have to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
But I think we see so many, I don't want to get too down a rabbit hole or morbid.
No, you're good, man.
But you hear so many people at the end of their days, like from this last generation and generation before of fathers, where they say like, finally say like, my dad finally said I love you.
Whew.
Like I never want to that's one thing I took on after my brother passes. I never end a conversation with people that matter
Yeah.
without telling them I love them.
Yeah.
Or that they mean something to me.
Yeah.
Because I don't want, if that's the last conversation we have.
Yeah.
And I tell my girls I love them way too much. Probably like Gemma, my 4-year-old, I'll go, guess what, Gemma? She goes, you love me. And I go, yeah. And she goes, I already know that. And I said, well, good. And I'm going to keep telling you that then.
Yeah.
Because I don't want you to forget it. Because sometimes we'll have hard days.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to forget that I love you.
Yep.
And I love who you are.
Yeah.
And I think that being a father and a man also means acknowledging that we have emotions. But I also think that there's a balance, right? Like we can have our emotions, but for anyone, if our emotions are the things that always control us, and sometimes I fall victim to that. My emotions take over.
Yeah.
But when we let our emotions take over, we aren't living into who we are. Our emotions are part of us, and we cannot separate our feelings from things. And when we try to box them up and say like, I feel nothing, click, that you're just denying a part of who you were created to be.
Yep.
Because God didn't give us emotions for no reason.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever you think, I don't know. My opinion, I don't think God gave us an emotion for no reason. And so to be able to feel those, but feel those in a way that is honoring to your family, to the people around you, and to who you were created to be, and to your relationship with Christ. I think those things matter a ton.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not talking about masculinity. I'm like, if you looked at me, I've never been stereotypically masculine. tiny little dude with a. Now I've got this big old mop. Like I know my wife Dia loves to laugh about this because she can tell if someone knew me before college or after college, and she can tell when someone knew me at my time when I was in college because they'll call me Sunshine. And that was
Sunshine.
The long hippie hair. I'm like, I've never been this big burly dude who's like, look at me. Like, yes, I played football, but also I played into high school because I'm 5'6", and back then I was a $160. You know, like it's been a while since then.
Is that Sunshine? Is that a Remember Titans reference?
Yeah.
Oh,
which
man.
Also great character, also not known for his masculinity in that movie.
Yeah.
So like,
for sure.
Like and so like traditional masculinity has never been something that I think people would have typically ascribed to me as being like the guy who's like, big tough guy, like, because I'm just not a big human, and I don't, and that's never been my personality either. Of like, I've always tried to be like, I've always been pretty outgoing and chatting and and like I loved being around people. I love it, and I enjoy that time with people and hearing their stories, and just being with people gives me energy. And in college, like I say I peaked socially because there were so many people to talk to, so many things, so much room for activities. And I I would never fall into that ascribed role of like what a tradition. I'm not, Clint Eastwood,
Yeah.
and that's never been who I am.
Yeah.
And so when you look at what it means to be masculine, though, it doesn't have to look like that. It's
Yep.
not being just this stoic person, because I mean, how many people do we see? Like, how many people of our generation do we hear like, I just wish I knew my dad cared about me, or like,
Yeah.
I know my dad loves me, but he's never said it, or I
Yeah.
know that he cares, but he does it by this.
Yeah.
And I mean, those things are fine too. I mean, like, there's no set balance of what it means to be a man and a father.
Yep.
But I think to say that someone feeling their feelings
Yes.
means they're not a man
Yeah.
is just wrong. It's false.
Yeah, and I feel like we live in this day and age where, and I talked about this on the last podcast where, like, obviously this podcast has a lot to do with masculinity, and there's like all this like red pill content out there. I don't know if you've ever heard of that phrase, but where it's basically just
from the
like,
Matrix, yeah.
It's a negative thing,
Okay.
but it's presented as a positive.
Can't remember
where-
which pill was the one.
Yeah, but it's basically like you gotta be a man's man. You gotta hit the gym every day. You have to, go after these women and degrade and stuff like that. Where like for me, when I look at masculinity, it's like to be able to fuse a situation is more masculine than escalating a situation. To be able to be emotionally, not just physically aware, but also emotionally aware is more masculine than just being a big brute,
Yeah.
And so like it's so true, like what you're saying about like like being with your emotions, sitting with your emotions, acknowledging your emotions, and also teaching your kids to do that too. I think that is so important.
I mean, I think what you were just saying of like, I think being a protector is a huge part about being a man, and being a protector sometimes it means you have to be a physical protector.
Yes, absolutely.
But also it's protecting the minds and hearts of people that are under your wing, under your care, that you love.
Yep.
And that can be friends, that can be family, that can be children, like my girls parrot it back to me, and they don't always agree that the way I'm doing it is the right one, because it doesn't mean it doesn't align with what they might want. But if I say, do mom and dad, what are we supposed to do? Take care of us, protect us. Eye roll. Yeah, that's our job. And so the first thing we're gonna do is, even if it isn't the thing that's someone's favorite or even our favorite, but we know it's the right thing for protection. And I think that is our calling as men in that kind of a relationship, is to be a protector.
Yeah.
And that is a form of being a caregiver.
Yes.
Of making sure that that's a way I care for my children, is to protect them. And sometimes that's just like, I'm meeting their physical needs. I'm making sure they are clothed and fed, but I'm also making sure that they are not putting themselves in a space that is unsafe, or a place that is unsafe. I'm not going to let my youngest go down to the random, overflow pond by herself because she doesn't swim real well, I'm not going to be like, yeah, go hop in the water. I'll see you in 10 minutes. Maybe. Good luck.
No. And it's so true, because like I feel like I said before, as men, we get so caught up in providing, that like, oh, I got to provide the house, I got to provide the finances, I got to provide this and that we tend to put the emotional side on the back burner,
and
where sometimes
part of it,
it's the most important. Like, if there's one thing that I can teach my son, is like, if he can have the emotional awareness, if he can identify how he feels, if he can not only just identify how he feels, but then if I can give him tools once he identifies, then it's like his brain is working. Now what? Now what?
I can't remember what that phrase is. I'm gonna butcher it, but it's the one of like, people might not remember what you said or did, but they are gonna remember how you made them feel.
Yes.
And so like, people will remember how you made them feel, and for our kids, I hope they remember how we taught them to feel, and to learn from our our teachings, but also from our mistakes. Because like I said, I'm a pretty emotional human being.
Yep.
And I can get real excited about good things, but
Yeah.
also real feist. There's no like middle, like I'm not that middle line person, like
Yeah.
just like even keeled. Like
Yep.
I'm like a roller coaster sometimes, and I know that, and so does so does Dia, and most people who know me know that.
Yeah, for
because
sure.
I wear it on my sleeve
Yeah.
pretty clearly. But I hope my girls learn from me that it's okay to experience joy, and it's okay to experience sadness and frustration, but maybe do it a little less
Mountain
jumpy
high, valley low.
as your dad does, because
Yeah.
I that's part of the things I have to try to teach and humble myself and say, hey, I did that wrong, and like
Yep.
I said earlier, I don't always love saying I'm wrong,
Yeah,
or
yep.
really ever.
Yeah.
But I've had to say it so much as a parent, and it humbles you, and it resets you.
Yep.
But it also it it's a good thing. It is a good thing because it shows them that we are people. And when you bring it back around, I mean, the most important thing is I try to bring it back around to Jesus. Like this is,
Yeah.
I was not being showing you how Jesus would have loved you differently.
Yeah.
And I didn't love you that way. And sometimes that's a heavy burden to carry for myself of like, I'm supposed to be Jesus to my kids.
Yep.
But he's so kind, and he is so gentle and loves us even when we're struggling.
Yeah.
And so that's a good reminder for me as a dad that
Yeah.
he still feels that way about me as his kid.
Yep.
And that I can still, when I mess up, instead of just leaning into the areas where I maybe did something or said something in a way that was not kind or not loving, that I can come back and there's reconciliation,
Yeah.
and there's grace from him, and there's grace I can show my kids, and I can teach them what it's like to show grace back to us as parents. But that's not the requirement. You know, it's like I'm trying to teach them that I love them, I forgive them. Can you forgive me? I did this wrong.
Yep.
And yeah, it's just, it's a thing, but it's a good thing, and like I said, being a parent's the best, and it's hard because it's you're bringing up this whole next generation, as it were, but you're also like working through a lot of your own stuff, and you're realizing
at
like
the same time
where you might have some areas that need to be repaired as you go through stuff. You're like, why does that bother me?
Yeah. Well, we are running on an hour already, man.
Oh gosh, I warned you, I'm a chatterbox.
No, you're good. I wish we can talk more about, like, you obviously you're a leadership coach and stuff.
Those things aren't nearly as important.
But yeah, but man, like, where can people find you?
Well, I'm at my house a lot, but no. If you want to check out, like I said, I'm really excited about what's happening at Haven.
Yeah.
So it's just really fun. I was just in a text with Gordon the other day, and I was saying, like, it's weird to say like we have a ministry field of Sioux Falls. Like we feel like we have a ministry field in Sioux Falls, because I was like, I never thought I'd have say ministry field and myself in the same breath.
Yeah.
But I think what is happening at Haven, making it a place that's not just art, a place where like dance is done and done well, because the teachers are great, and I'm like, I look at them, I can't do any of that. It hurts. My body hurts just watching you. But where we're able to like open it up for things and even do ministry through that stuff, that's really exciting stuff. And I get to do some leadership coaching out of that space, so we have a building to do some of that.
But, for sure.
If anyone's interested in that and wants to learn more, you just want to learn more, we do open work. In fact, tonight, this will already have aired after this has happened, but every month they're doing my wife does like creative worship nights that are open, and also just other worship nights that are at Haven. So if that's something anyone's interested in, and just coming in and spending some time doing worship, or just want to see the space, it's a cool old building. But they can check it out at havenartscollective.com. It's a very long website. And then, like I said, the leadership stuff, the Enneagram stuff, like I said, that's so much like third, fourth, fifth tier now, but still a passion of mine. And that's beplanted.co, because apparently the M costs $1,200 and the CO costs $30. So I was like, that's an expensive letter. So I just, if they're going to let me buy .co, it's close enough.
Yeah, that works. I don't think it matters as much anymore, man.
Well, I'll tell you what, it mattered to someone, because that was an expensive letter.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I mean, that's what we've got going on.
Okay,
and then,
cool.
I mean, that's just our family. And then, I think, I think that's the best way to get connected with us and
Cool.
what we're doing.
Perfect.
And, the other stuff, the other work stuff, the parent stuff, like you can always, we're happy to talk about all that at any point. And,
Yeah.
I don't know. We try to be pretty open people. And,
Yeah.
what'll happen is I'll probably be the one who you'll chat with, and then you'll meet my wife and you'll be like, she's way cooler than him. And that's the right choice.
There you go. There you go. Well, thank you so much for being on the Father Built podcast, man. It was a pleasure. I will say, like, this conversation didn't go as planned, but
But it was the one we're probably supposed to have.
But it was so good. Like, it's so much stuff that I learned, not just about you, but like even the like going through the grieving process. So I appreciate you, being vulnerable and sharing. And so, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and close this out. So thank you so much for listening or watching the Father Built podcast. This is where we build fathers up in holiness, healthiness, and happiness, and we aim to give fathers the tools to build their house of legacy. Thank you so much, and always remember, peace, love, blessings. We are out.